Hey, if you are looking for a project that is fence picket based, sells year round, beginner friendly, and you can make pretty quickly, you found the right video. Let's get started. All right, so I love this project. It is the nut bar, the squirrel feeder, however you want to look at it. Bird feeders, great, yes, everybody makes them. You can sell them in the spring, but squirrels don't fly south for the summer. Okay, you have to admit that would be pretty cool if they did. But these squirrels are around all year. So we're gonna make a squirrel feeder. I saw these on Etsy selling for $60-something first time I ever saw them. I've never tried to sell one for that, but I've sold them for 30 and they're pretty quick to make. All right, so step one here is pretty straightforward. I'm going to measure 12 inches and that is going to be the back of this squirrel feeder. Now that the back is done, I'm going to measure 7 inches, and this is going to be my bottom. Boom. So, right off the bat, we have the bottom and the back. This project's gonna go quick. All right, for the roof, I'm going to cut a 6-inch piece. Quick. All right, so now we have bottom, back, and that way, roof. The next piece I'm going to cut here is going to be for the bench right here. Now I've seen these done where people do like little bar stools instead, in which case you would just do like a thin dowel rod and then cut a thicker dowel rod to be like the actual seat. That's one option. We're going with the easier version here today. We're also going to change up the center a little bit. The way I had done this one was for plexiglass. It's a little harder for most people to do. But let's cut the little strip for right here. So the one on this, I only used about 1 inch wide, and I will tell you these work. Here, let me show you a picture of a squirrel actually eating one of these real quick. So they will use it. I'm gonna make this one a little bit thicker though, just so it's kind of like, you know, maybe the squirrel could actually really sit on this thing. So I'm gonna go with a 2-inch strip here. And again, I'm just gonna mark 2 inches and make a quick cut. All right, there we go. Now, you can see I had little bases for the bench here. So I'm gonna make another strip that same size, which I'll then cut 2 little notches off for the bottoms there. All right, so the next piece I wanna cut here is for my sides. So the way I'm gonna do this is I'm going to cut a section of picket that's the length I want, and then I'm going to rip it down the middle so I have equal for both sides, and then I'll put my mitered edge on here. Okay, so for my sides, I'm gonna go 8 inches, and I'm just gonna make that mark. And I've been using a speed square just to mark that line clear every time I make my mark. If you have a laser, you don't really need to do that. It's just I'm trying to keep good habits. And this saw does thankfully have that laser feature, so as long as I line up with a dot, I would be fine. But like I said, good habits. So this, I'm gonna go rip in half. One thing I love about woodworking, you can put your own touches on things. So like I said, I'm going to miter the end of this. I want that angle so the roof slopes down a little bit. You don't have to. If you just want to keep it straight, go ahead. But I'm going to put a miter on here. So I'm not going with any crazy big angle here. I'm just going to go, you know, maybe 10 degrees. And that's plenty. And I'm gonna just cut these bolts at the same time to make my life easier. Boom. All right, the next piece we're gonna make here is for our little shelf. This is what's actually going to hold the food. While I would love to give you an exact measurement here, here's what you have to understand. Every fence picket is different. So here's what you're gonna do to make this accurate. Take one of the pieces you've already cut, just to get an idea here. Take those two sides that you have. Put those two sides together and put them even on the edge, like this. What you have left here, that is how wide this shelf is gonna have to be. The width of the picket minus 2 thicknesses. And the reason that is if you look at this one, we have the width of the picket here, the whole width here, and then 2 sides, and it fits in the middle. So if you think about it, it's basically this. It's gonna be easier to measure it if you do this though. So just put those together, get that measurement from there to the end. That's how wide this piece has to be. So for me to do this, again, I would set these up on the end here. And I'm just gonna take that tape measure, put it right there, and I'm looking at basically 4 3/8 of an inch from there across. The other measurement you need to think about here is how far out this is coming. So for this one, I came out about 3.5 inches. All right, so mine's gonna be 3.5 inches by 4 3/8 of an inch. All right, so I know a lot of people would have looked at that cut and said, you know, I've got some room there, all right, where my finger's not gonna be hitting that blade. That's too close for my comfort. I wanna keep my fingers. Use a push stick, clamp it down. I also could have used this right here. So keep your fingers, take care of yourself. Make good choices. All right, I'm ready to do some assembling here. So what I'm going to do, first thing, I'm going to take my back and my bottom. So don't mix up your bottom and your roof. All right, so your bottom was the bigger one, bigger than the roof here. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the bottom edge here. And this is going to go right on here. Now, I've made these a few different ways. What I'm gonna do here is just to hold this in place, I'm just gonna pop 2 nails into this real quick with the glue to make this hole. All right, so that is technically in place, and that glue is gonna dry, and this will be fairly strong. However, you have to remember what the purpose of this is. This isn't for a little tiny bird. You're gonna have a squirrel on here. So I'm going to also add in 2 screws. And you may be seeing, okay, why did I just put the nails and then the glue? I always say better safe than sorry. The nails are so this is in place. I don't have to have it clamped now. I kind of had it where I want it. I'm just gonna take some 1 1/4 inch screws and I'm gonna drive those in through the bottom. One little way to do this easier, so I set this down on the edge of the table here. Now it's nice and flat, I don't have to worry about balancing it. Make sure it sits properly. And there is 2. So now that's not going anywhere. All right, so now that I have that, the next thing I want to do is get my sides attached here. And you got to remember, my shelf is going to sit in between the 2. And you can see, if you remember how I kind of measured that out before, I wanted it so that these would be even on the ends, and we'd have room there, and it worked out nicely. Because remember how I measured that? Took away the 2 thicknesses from there. So, I'm going to pop these sides on. If you did your miter, make sure it's slanting away from the back so it's actually going downhill. All right, so do a little glue. And again, you have a choice here. One thing I love about woodworking, lots of choices. You can use screws, you can use nails. So I just grabbed a clamp. What I'm actually going to do is kind of hold that there for a second. Get a clamp on so I have it where I want it, where it's all set up. And now, again, you have the option. I'm just going to use nails here, because that glue is going to do a good job with holding. Solid. Now we'll do the same thing on this side. All right, and one thing I want to point out here, there's a little bit of a space here. You can put a little bit of glue on the bottom of that, put those together, bend that up with some nails. You can pop some screws in from the bottom to hold that tight to that. Again, this is one of those better safe than sorry situations. What I think I'm gonna do is just use 2 more screws, and that'll pull that in there nice and tight together, and that way we'll know it'll hold the weight of the squirrels. And I kind of want to make sure these are in the right spot here. I'm going to kind of hold that where I want it. Pre-drill my hole. I'm going to pre-drill the hole kind of towards the front here. Again, because I'm thinking structural support. Your side. All right, nice and solid now. All right, next piece I'm going to attach here is just going to be my shelf. I want to make sure that still fits in there, and that's nice and snug. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring mine up from the bottom. I'm going to say 4 inches. I'd say that's a good number here. So what I mean there is 4 inches from the top here, the top of the bottom, I'll say, to the base of the shelf right here. So that's going to be about 4 inches. Does it have to be exact? No, you can kind of eyeball this. So what I'm going to do here, though, is glue on 3 sides. 1, 2. Actually, you know what? I didn't want to do that. I kind of have the rough look going here. I want to do it on the sides, but I have a still rough side and I have a smooth side. Makes more sense to me to put that smooth side in the back. So we're going to take that glue off of there. We're going to put it on the back here. And we're going to attach this. So the weirdest thing happened to me the other day. I had some rough cut lumber, and my plan was actually to smooth it all out in the morning. So I have the rough cut lumber, I go to sleep, I came out in the morning, it was all smooth. I think it was the Sandman. All right, so I'm gonna put this in here where I wanted it. Like I said, I'm coming up about 4 inches. I'm kind of eyeing it. Get the extra glue off of there. All right, have it where I want it. And I'm just gonna pop some nails in from the side. If you have glue oozing out anywhere, wet paper towels are your best friend. All right, now we have a couple things to do here. We have our roof, which me personally, what I like to do is hinge this roof, and I'm going to show you some options here. But we have that, and we have our bench. So we have the actual bench part, and then what we want to do is cut two small pieces here that it's basically going to sit on. So you're going to get tired of me saying this, but I'm going to say this again. I love woodworking because personal touch. You don't have to put a bench here. Honestly, you could put a roof on this and you could call that a day because the squirrel is just going to come and sit right here. That bench isn't for functionality for the squirrel. It's to make this thing look like a little bar, basically. All right, so I could throw this on here, put some food here, and be done. But there's still some different options we have. So I'm just going to show you a couple ways to do this. I'm going to make that bench real quick. So these tiny cuts here, so I'm cutting these little nubs off of here. This would be a great place if I had a bandsaw or a scroll saw. I don't. I could do that on the miter saw. I could hold that. But I figure, hey, let's go old fashioned here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these about 1.5 inches. So I'm just going to make 2 little 1.5 inch pieces here. One. Two. All right, so I have my long piece of bench left, and then I have my 2 little nubs I just made. So essentially all I'm going to be doing is making a little bench like that, and then putting that on here. So let's throw these together real fast. Again, get off that excess glue. Boom, we have a bench fit for a squirrel. Now, put a little glue on the bottom of this. And if I had a sander, I'd probably hit this real quick. I could take a minute to go sand it by hand, but for our intents and purposes here, I'm going to acknowledge that that's a little bit crooked, and I'm going to deal with it. Again, personal touch. Now I'm not going to put this all the way up to the front. I kind of split the difference between the side here and the end. And I'm just going to put that in place. And again, I love using clamps here. I have it right where I want it. So I'm going to kind of just clamp that in place. I'm not going to go super crazy tightening it. I don't want to snap that board. And I'm just going to pop a couple nails in. Again, the glue does most of the holding. The nails are just there to hold it while it dries. And of course they do add some support. So a little tip here, that popped that off a little bit. But again, my glue's still gonna dry, so I'm actually gonna just use my clamp and tighten those down a little bit. And you could even leave clamps on it and let it sit for a little bit. So I can grab another clamp. And I could do that, and I could leave it for 10 minutes or so. We are back to another option here. I can take this roof, I can just put it on here, and I can say, you know what, that's gonna be done. Nothing wrong with that. However, let me grab that other nut bar I told you about before. This was kind of the demo one I made at work when I was playing around with things. For this one, you see I did a hinged roof, and you see I put these channels right here. So the way I did this one was so that a piece of plexiglass could actually slide down into that. So when you did it, it was almost like a window there, and the food would come out the bottom. I don't have a router at home. I could technically do something like this on the table saw. I could set the depth to, 1/8 of an inch or so and do a couple cuts. But I'm trying to keep this one a little bit simpler, but I also want to show you some of the options you have. So here's what I can do. I can attach this roof right there, and I can just put food on there, and the squirrels are going to love it. Another option, if you want to do it, I'm not going to do it here, again, just showing you some options for putting your touch on it, is I could hinge this, and just like I did here with this base, I could cut another piece to that same width, but maybe make it, half of the distance I have here. And I could put it there so I'd have a solid piece of wood there. And what that would do is I could hinge this so it would flip up, and I could kind of fill it with food, and I could have a little bit of extra food there. Again, this is all personal preference. Say it again, it's why I love woodworking. For this one, we're gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna put a solid roof on there. And what that's gonna mean is that whenever I wanna feed these guys, I can jump and come over. I can put some nuts here, put some squirrel food, put some bird seed, because if you make a bird feeder, it's just a squirrel feeder anyways. So let's do this the simple way. All right, so all I'm going to do here, let's put a little glue here after I open it. Put this on. All right, so we are in the process of making this squirrel feeder. If you're liking this video, make sure you like and subscribe. Let's get back to work. Take these clamps off. And boom. Now, you see two different options here. Again, hinged. This one, obviously, I had the luxury of a laser engraver. You can wood burn, use the resources you have. With the hinged roof, again, I made this so I could cut a little piece of plexiglass and slide it in. Great option. You could keep it simple. Do this. Honestly, if I just sat here and made this, this would have taken less than 10 minutes. So it's a quick build. And guess what? Squirrels love these. I have one hanging outside my house. Again, here's a picture of a squirrel enjoying it. It actually got to the point last spring where if I didn't have food in there, the squirrels would come sit on my windowsill and just stare in the house like, dude, where's our food? All right, I want to take a quick pause here to talk about making money with this project. Now, this is a little different than the bird feeder everybody makes. Squirrels, like I said, they're around year round, so you can sell these year round. When I first saw this project, they were selling on Etsy for $60-something. Now, it wasn't this version selling for $60-something. It was more like this one, where it was laser engraved, it had a hinged top, they had a piece of plexiglass here so it looked like a little window. And instead of a bench, they made the tiny little bar stools. So it was a little bit fancier. But let's just lowball here. I like to be conservative, especially I teach high school students in the shop, and they're always like, we want to make all this money. And I'm like, think realistically with what you're trying to sell though. Realistically, I'm gonna say $15 for these. We're gonna just lowball, $15 for a squirrel feeder. If you can make 5 of these an hour, which is not a problem at all if you have basic woodworking skills, 5 of these an hour at $15, that's $75. Minus $20 in materials at $4 a fence picket, basically, a little less, but then you got some glue and nails. That's $55 in profit for an hour of work. That's not a bad deal, and that's very conservative, realistic. You want to put a little bit more work into them, you want to sand them up, you have a laser engraver, go for it. That just means you can add to your price.